I have an addiction that I created to help me when I was feeling lonely. And so my addiction was romantic comedies.
I love that.
And so I would get hooked on either these Korean or Chinese or American romantic comedies. Even got a subscription to Hallmark, because I liked having happy endings. And so this was a way of distracting myself. And one of the negative habits that went along with that is I would start eating some junk food while I was watching the movies sitting there on the couch. And this really kind of came to a head during COVID when there was a lot of isolation going on and loneliness was really pushed to a very high level in many cases.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Love Sugar Podcast. I'm your host, Jeanne Byrd. Welcome to the Love Sugar Podcast, transforming love lives one bite at a time. My name is Jeanne Byrd, and I'm your host. I'm a relationship coach specializing in finding love and ending love in a healthy way. I also have a Master of Science degree in advanced health and nutrition coaching. Exploring love and romance through the lens of emotional and physical well-being is not something you often hear about, but it's actually critical to understand. Why? Because your experience of love and your perception of love is happening through your mind and your body. So to have the best experience of love, you need to take care of yourself, physically and emotionally. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about loneliness in all of its forms. The U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, sounded the alarm on America's growing loneliness problem last year, and he also proposed a potential solution: simply building stronger relationships. Our epidemic, he said, of loneliness and isolation has been an underappreciated public health crisis that has harmed individual and societal health. Loneliness affects our older population and young people. So loneliness results as a lack of social connection, isolation, and it also has a negative impact on mental and physical health, often creating difficulties in forming and maintaining relationships. Loneliness can also have a negative impact on nutrition and overall health. Studies have found that lonely individuals are more likely to have poor dietary habits, such as skipping meals or eating unhealthy foods and overeating. And this can lead to nutritional deficiencies, weight gain, and other problems such as obesity. So to discuss all of the above is my friend, colleague, and fellow transformative coach, Greg Wheeler. And Greg, before I bring you on, I just want to give our listeners a brief summary of your numerous accomplishments.
Thank you, Jeanne. It's a pleasure.
Great. So Greg is a transformational love, relationship, divorce, and life coach, as well as a published author of the book, The Single Dad's Essentials, the 12 most important things single dads need to know. And as a dad raising 4 children on his own, he has a skill set and a perspective that is unique. Greg is also on a mission to contribute his impressive skills to combating loneliness in the world, which is why I've asked him to join me today as we dive into this very concerning and timely topic. So welcome to the Love Sugar Podcast, Greg.
It's wonderful to be here, Jeanne. I'm excited.
Good.
And thank you for that beautiful intro. I much appreciate it.
It's from my heart, and I know it's true. So the origin of any human condition begins with the relationship with ourselves. In our work, this is foundational. Would you like to expand on that, Greg, and also share your experience of loneliness and how raising 4 children as a single dad impacted you?
Well, that's a pretty broad set of topics. So we are defined, and we define ourselves in our relationships. So how we show up and how relationships show up for us really does define our overall well-being, our overall happiness, and also it provides opportunities for us to continue to grow and expand, or opportunities for us to shrink and hide in terms of how it goes. And so many times, a lot of our childhood experiences show up in ways that cause us to have certain fears that limit our abilities to be in healthy, growing, mutually supportive relationships. And then we develop compensating mechanisms, and you touched on how big of a crisis loneliness is, because when we have certain fears or certain self-limiting beliefs, like maybe I'm not good enough, or I'm unlovable, or I'm too heavy, then we develop other compensating mechanisms. And some of those mechanisms involve eating comfort foods. That's one way of doing it. And then it can become a negative spiral in some ways. So I was alone when I was raising my 4 kids. And it was hard because their mom was 1,000 miles away. And so I had to learn to be not only their dad, but a Mr. Mom as well. And so that was all consuming. So in order to get help, in order to be able to support them, I had to reach out and form partnerships with my kids' friends, parents, and families, and people on their coaches, on the teams they were involved in school, so that I had a support network to do that. And so that was one way of my not being so alone, but it was also a necessity of raising 4 kids when you're a single dad and you don't have someone else to help you with it.
I love that you're speaking about that. So intuitively, you were prepared to reach out and ask for help. I love that.
Well, both, and it was also a necessity, because you can't be 2 places at once. And so you need to figure out how you're going to create a support network. And that was a lifesaver for me. And that's part of what I mentioned in my book.
Right. So you have then and did develop skills that were actually helping you be able to thrive during this time rather than feeling all alone and neglected.
Right. So I think the 2 most important skills were, one, you wanted to learn to offer, to show up and say, can I help you out with your kids? Can we carpool for the event or whatever? And so you don't have to go and I can take care of it. And then it was okay for me to ask for them to carpool and take my kids. So I created a way to create those connections so that it was okay for me to ask for help. And so that was another important skill, is being willing to ask for help. Because most people were very happy. If they're going anyway, they'd be happy to take my kids along with them.
Right. And so many people make the automatic meaning, though, that they can't ask for help because, again, we can get back to our relationship with ourselves, right? That there's a way that we're abandoning ourselves anyway. So how could we possibly ask for help from another when that's exactly what we need? So I love that you figured this out, as I said, intuitively. And again, you instigated that's what you needed.
Right, exactly. My kids needed the ride to the after school event. And so I reached out and it made all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And then there were times when I filled in for them when I would carpool.
Sure. Very reciprocal, Greg.
Yeah.
I have no doubt. So let's move into this really serious epidemic that we're experiencing in this country and I'm sure throughout the world. But, there are findings that say that more than a third of adults 45 and older are experiencing loneliness, and more than a quarter of adults 65 and older also feel socially isolated. And then in January of 2024, there was a poll by the American Psychiatric Association stating that over 30% of the population experience feelings of loneliness, and 10% feels it every day. So
Right.
Would you like to speak about that a little bit?
Well, let's also talk about the impact of that. What does that mean? What do those numbers mean? Well, it means that 32% of people over 65 are going to have the potential to die at an earlier age.
Yeah.
It also means that they're going to have higher medical bills. They're going
That's
to
for
have,
sure.
depending upon which ways it's showing up. It also means that they're going to have a lower quality of life. Their happiness quotient is going to be lower in general than these other people who are not experiencing loneliness. And I think that there's an important part about that. And that as the human beings that we are, the human animal part of ourselves that is genetically programmed, we are designed to be in relationship.
Right.
We are designed to be connected to others. We co-regulate one another. We support each other so that we don't feel such a high level of anxiety because we know that there's someone who can help us out if we need it.
Yeah. Absolutely. The blue zones, which I've been reading a lot about lately, those are communities that are formed exactly to counteract what you're saying, to counteract that loneliness so that people are living together, they're gardening together, they're eating together, they are laughing together, and they're living well into their hundreds. So this is a very clear and specific way to combat loneliness, is to create that community connection, because otherwise in isolation, people, and especially I saw this a lot in COVID when I was visiting my mother in memory care, people just dive down into dementia when they are lonely and isolated. They don't have anybody to speak to, and they start speaking to their unseen friends. And it's just so tragic. And that, of course, notwithstanding the risk of heart attacks and strokes and premature death as a result of being isolated.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think that, I think it's the greatest malady in the world today, loneliness. When 50% of the population can say that they've experienced loneliness, then it is definitely impacting a huge percentage of the population on a worldwide basis. And the thing that I wanted to add about what you were saying is that there's a lot of things that have changed in the last 50, 60 years. And one of the big things that's changed is the traditional family structure of grandparents being around. And one of the parents being at home supporting children. Many families have both parents working. So as a child, then the child is experiencing loneliness. And sometimes the parents are so busy taking care of everything that they're lonely also, which then impacts the quality of the life for the child. And so the blue zone and those kind of communities that you're talking about is a real positive way that people are trying to create that. It does take a community to really raise a healthy child. And a simplified version of that is what I did when I created my network of support as a single dad. I created a community that could help with the kids. So there are ways to bring people together to help get that support, minimize your loneliness, and if you're a parent, help with the loneliness of your kids.
Another factor of loneliness that I've seen exhibited as a coach, and I know you've probably seen the same, is that, people are resistant to taking responsibility for being the source of their own experience. It's much easier to shame and blame others about what's wrong with your life than to really lean in and get curious about how you might be responsible. How are you the source? So what would you like to share about that, Greg?
Well, it's a really important part of every client's journey that you and I work with. And it is so sneaky in some ways because it's so much easier to blame someone else than it is to look at ourselves and see how we might be contributing to it. And these are things that we've learned how to do, again, from a very early age, between 0 and 7 and 8 years old. And it's natural for us. And it's so natural that 90% of the clients who I meet and start working with, they don't even know they're doing it.
Right. Yeah, it's a default. It's habitual.
It is. It's very habitual. And that makes it so insidious because it's so easy for a person to say, it's not about me, it's about them. It's not my fault. It's about them. When in fact, you're already showing up and you're not sharing your feelings, needs, and desires, or you're not showing up and being honest and vulnerable and authentic in your conversations. And so because you're hiding something about yourself, you're actually confusing the other person because in a way you're lying to them because they're not meeting the real you.
Yes,
and then
that's very true.
And then eventually it comes out that you share something new and they're like surprised. Well, who is this person? And so then it causes difficulties, big bumps in the road, and eventually it can create a codependent relationship, and then there's a downward spiral, and then it really causes the relationship, unless someone gets help, to break apart.
Right, and that's what in our work, as coaches, we're able to help people see that whatever they're feeling or wherever they're thinking from is probably a much younger version of themselves that was originated from childhood. And as we matured chronologically in age, as we grew up, we didn't necessarily mature in terms of our social maturation and understanding of who we have the potential to be in life. And so that's where in our coaching, we have the opportunity to really help people transform, as we were talking about earlier, transform out of a victimized consciousness that was a carryover from childhood, but does not have to be moving forward in their future, that a life, a destiny life can be created, one that you choose.
Yeah, and it's not that you were wrong. It's not that you were bad in what you were showing up. You just didn't know any different. And so the opportunity to learn is there when you're willing to look back and see how when you did or didn't do something and it caused this negative outcome, and in the past you blamed someone else for it, as opposed to owning your part in how you showed up or what you did or didn't do. Now there's a way to look at it and say, oh my goodness, I can see that I contributed to that. And that is the beginning of consciousness and awareness and mindfulness.
And liberation.
Exactly, liberation. And because then you're liberated to make a different choice.
That's right.
It then creates a different future and a different experience. So it's not rocket science here, but it can be challenging when you've been doing the same thing over and over again to see it for yourself.
And we keep expecting different results, and we know what that is.
Yes, we do. And there's an important piece about being willing to look, because people don't want to, they're scared of making themselves bad or wrong or inferior or something like that. But the reality is you're being kind and loving to yourself because you're creating these growth opportunities to see, wow, when I did this, it really didn't work out the way I wanted it to. Or I can see in my last 3 relationships, I was overgiving and not showing up and sharing my real feelings. And so therefore, it blew up again. They all blew up the same way when I finally decided to share my feelings and stand up for what I wanted.
Right, exactly. Or you were actually pushing away the very thing you wanted by being, unavailable or not needing anything. And so the person gets confused, and that creates more loneliness right there. I'd like to kind of move into the food element of the loneliness, right? Because our food choices can also impact our feelings of isolation. Right? Because if we're eating ultra processed foods or we're just not eating, I've seen that a lot with older folks, just, not eating, forgetting to eat, and also not drinking enough water, which is forcing them to be so dehydrated and really at the risk of fainting and falling and breaking a hip. And we know the result of that. This highly processed food that not only is destroying your life force, your organs, but also really heavily impacting your mood. And so then if your mood is really down, that's further causing more isolation,
Yeah, I can't agree more with everything you said. And one of the things that happens too is we have this self-image of ourselves. We have this vision of who we are and how we show up and how others receive us. And so when we feel lack of energy, when we feel like we're putting on weight, where we feel like we're in a slightly down mood, then we are a lot less prone to reach out to someone, to go to an activity, to be outside. So it can be a downward spiral.
Yeah.
That poor diet lowers your energy level, lowers your self-esteem of yourself. So you're afraid that you might be criticized or rejected or not accepted when you finally do get motivated and get out there and do something in a group or join a group. So it's actually very insidious, that it's a slippery slope, and it can continue to make the situation a lot worse and aggravate the loneliness.
Yeah. And kind of following up with that, I think that those feelings of loneliness then inspire people to just get on their phones and start scrolling, which then contributes to more isolation, more loneliness, more meaning-making frames that are disempowering. I'm sitting here alone and I'm scrolling and I'm eating poorly and I'm making the meaning that there's no one out there for me. I'm not in a position to be able to look for love or to sustain love. So I'll just sit here and keep scrolling and look at other people's lives and see how happy they are and what that gap is between their life and my life.
Yeah, that's one of the unfortunate coping mechanisms. And yet there are many more. Some people start drinking too much so they don't feel their feelings of loneliness.
That's right.
Some people might be doing some drugs more often to stop them from noticing their feelings and feeling so lonely. There are a number of addictions that people might take on. And when we were preparing for our podcast, I shared with you that I have an addiction that I created to help me when I was feeling lonely. And so my addiction was romantic comedies.
I love that.
And so I would get hooked on either these Korean or Chinese or American romantic comedies. Even got a subscription to Hallmark, because I liked having happy endings. And so this was a way of distracting myself. And one of the negative habits that went along with that is I would start eating some junk food while I was watching the movies, sitting there on the couch. And this really kind of came to a head during COVID, when there was a lot of isolation going on and loneliness was really pushed to a very high level in many cases. And it also aggravated some relationships because people were forced to be together where when they had two jobs, they were actually able to be apart.
So many marriages. I know we were very busy during that time in our relationship coaching, weren't we? I mean, yes, people found the cracks in that relationship because they were forced to be together 24/7.
Right. Yeah. And whereas before they'd been able to escape. So I'm talking about these coping mechanisms in terms of how we deal with our loneliness. And so there's quite a plethora of them. And I think the power of what we've been sharing about so far is to raise your awareness, to become conscious of these different ways that loneliness has been showing up for us and be able to name them and to see these different coping mechanisms so that we can change it.
Right. And I think that really has hit home so hard for children and kids in middle school. They had to stop going to the classroom and interacting socially, and they had to be at home. And the studies are showing that most of them did not thrive in that learning environment of being virtual. They need that interaction with their peers and the teacher and so forth. So, some people just never even turned on their computer. I have family members who did not thrive during that time. And I feel so sad for them because they're never going to get those years back. Of course, you move forward, but it's just our children suffered greatly from COVID.
I hope that the parents and the school people, school teachers, support associates, are helping the children get back into the swing of it. Because there can be, when people, as we were talking earlier, loneliness can be a downward spiral. So if you develop the habits associated with loneliness, the coping mechanisms of being connected to social media all the time and scrolling or just poking around the internet or being connected to reality TV all the time or something like that, these are all isolating mechanisms and they've become habits that the children need to be aware of and break. Otherwise, they're going to continue to self-isolate.
I think also this whole COVID situation has been even exacerbated by the political divide that we find ourselves in this country, so that even families, COVID, irrespective of COVID, just families who are influenced by this polarization that's going on in the country, where people don't speak to their families anymore, or their friends or their coworkers because of where they are in the spectrum of politics. It's just gotten so crazy and out of hand. And, I, for one, will do anything to help alleviate this situation, whatever I, as a single person, can do to help bridge that gap of this division and to bring people back together again, to accept our differences and still love each other.
COVID was a really challenging time for all of us in many ways. And the advent and the popularity of social media and the internet provided all these avenues for people to find people who say and believe exactly the same things that they're saying and they're believing in. So this allowed the divisiveness to continue to grow, because instead of working with family members or their community or whatever and being able to have a discussion where you can share different points of view, you can agree to disagree on things, you can learn from each other and take a little bit from this opinion, a little bit from that opinion, people then found that they could coagulate online, so to speak, gather in their groups and share information that supports them taking a really strong stand on whatever their personal belief is or their personal opinion is about these different topics. And so not only did it allow them to become more set in their ways, so to speak, or more firmer in their own personal perspectives. But it also isolated them because the people were not next door. They were not in the house. You couldn't go talk to them except to be connected to them online. And so while there are some advantages to social media to provide connections to people who do things that you like to do and then start doing them with those people locally, it also creates a lot of divisiveness and separation because you're only able to talk to these people that think and feel and believe the same way that you do.
Yeah.
By isolating and connecting virtually.
Yeah, so you're not really learning and gaining perspectives on anything. You're just finding and creating evidence,
Right.
That your perspective, that your narrative is the only one. The loneliness that ensues as a result of this social media isolation really needs a new perspective. It needs a new, maybe regulation.
Wow, that's a really deep topic, and there's a lot of strong opinions about that as well. So I've been around since the beginning of the computer and the tech industry, and before I have a master's in electrical and computer engineering, and I was doing that for a number of years before I found my true passion of being a relationship, divorce, and life coach, helping people transform their lives. And computers to me are a tool. So the question is instead of our social media and phones becoming our best buddies, they should be a tool to help us find information and help us find where we can gather, where we can participate in things that we enjoy doing together with others, and then go there. And so it's a tool and not a replacement for having a group of friends, to having a partner, and to being able to isolate yourself instead of a tool that can help you find things that you want to join and be involved in.
It's gotten to the point where online, your whole self-esteem is predicated on how many likes you get on your posts, And if you don't get the likes, then you are absolutely catapulted down into this deep depression. And how isolating is that? And also very, very untrue. So I think that loneliness that's created by this isolation in social media is something that really is actually being looked at. There are, in Congress, people are coming up with, bills to try to mitigate this, to really make this a very bipartisan issue so that loneliness with especially children reverting to their phones as their only company is averted, that we can transform this, turn this around.
It can feed our false beliefs about ourselves. It can feed our fears, our paranoias, our trauma. And so if we're feeling like, well, maybe we're not lovable and we don't get enough likes, well, there it is. I'm really not lovable, or look at that. Nobody is responding to my post. Maybe I'm really not good enough. And so then you get reaffirmed in this belief that I'm not good enough. And so it can provide a lot of negative feedback that helps aggravate our lowering self-esteem, which then lowers our desire to be engaged with other people face to face, which then really aggravates our loneliness.
Yeah, it's so true. We see it time and time again. I had a client, I'll call her Lori, and we just finished about a week ago. And in the beginning, when she first came to me, she was so lonely and so desperate that she would literally look through her phone contacts and just call and leave messages, just literally crying for a connection because she was so lonely. And of course, this was during COVID too, so it exacerbated it. But that desire, but I loved and I, of course, affirmed for her desire to connect. She was on the right track, but it was not to come from a place of desperation and loneliness, because what that did was inspire her to call people who actually weren't on her level playing field, people that she really didn't have resonance with. But when you're lonely and desperate, you just want to have a placeholder. So we really worked on that. So at the end, she was being much more discerning because she had developed a relationship with herself that was so trustworthy and intimate and count onable that she wasn't lonely anymore. And she could pick and choose her friends based on intuitively who she felt was the right people for her to engage with.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I've had the same experience with a number of clients that I've taken through Calling in the One. And, it's wonderful when you get that email a year later and they tell you that they're married and they're happy and they're thankful for the journey. And the common theme, along with what you shared, is they learned how to love themselves enough first. So they knew that they were worthy of deep connection. They knew they were worthy of being discriminated and not lowering their standards or just taking something that's available. Being able to say, well, no, that's not me and that's not what I want and what I deserve. And so then they were able to be discriminating. And so they loved themselves enough to lean in and move forward with what it was they really wanted. And so it's just really beautiful and rewarding. So that's one of the ways that you and I are both helping decrease loneliness, one client at a time.
One client at a time. I love that. One heart at a time, healing hearts.
That's right.
Right. Let's dive into the help and support that we can be, that others can be, and that's available out there to really combat this epidemic of loneliness in the world. And, I think there's so many ways that we can help people who are marginalized, who are vulnerable. And that really does involve, on the most basic level, getting off our phones and getting in our car and going to other places to maybe sit with people, and extending yourself. And, I love it. I did this quite a bit when I was with my mother in memory care. And those people who were not as down the ladder into dementia as she was, just talking to them, being able to, chat with them and ask them questions about their past, and they can get really chatty. And it's just so lovely, to connect in that way and to see their faces light up as a result of someone extending themselves. So what about you? What are some ideas that you have for really helping to combat this loneliness?
Well, there's the really simple, easy ones, right? And you touched on that. When you're out going to the supermarket, you can say hi to someone in the aisle. You can smile at the cashier and ask them how their day's going. I have found that it's, people behind the desk, they're working so hard to take care of us and do whatever it is that we're there to get help with. And there's a long line and they're so busy. And when you just take a moment and say, how's your day going? It looks like you're really busy and I appreciate your help. You'd be surprised how you can light other people up. And that ability to reach out is a simple way of getting connection and some feedback. The other thing is you can make a phone call to one of your family members or relatives or something and just check in, see how they're doing, let them know that you missed them. And just, that's, again, a simple connection. If you have a pet or if you're out taking a walk, getting some fresh air and you see one of your neighbors, you can just stop and chit chat and see how they're doing, find out what's going on in the neighborhood. These are all simple ways.
That's so simple. And especially, the dog, if you have a dog, you're going to make connections with other people. That's just the way it goes, which is just a beautiful way to connect with others because you have that shared context
That's right.
of your beloved animal, So that's a beautiful way. I think too, volunteering, like becoming a big brother or a big sister, and fostering people who are less fortunate. I think that's another beautiful way to, really create connection with others. The other one is the opportunity to volunteer at hospitals and whatever you can do.
Yeah, so I was thinking, as you go up the scale of more level of involvement, so modest levels of involvement are what you're just talking about. Identify a group that's doing what you like to do. There are jogging groups, there are bike riding groups, there are book reading groups. Meetup online is one way of finding some of those groups. Also, that's one of the things that a social network can help you do is connect with one of those groups. One of my passions is I love to play disc golf, frisbee golf. And so I join a winter league and I'm out every Sunday in the snow or the rain or whatever, as long as it's not lightning. And I'm there with my buddies and we're playing disc golf, and it's a great social activity that I like. In downtown Princeton, the community center, now almost every town of any size has a community center, and they have activities going on. The Princeton one has dancing on Saturday nights, and it rotates. So first Saturday of the month is South American dance, and then they have ballroom dance on the third.
Oh, wonderful.
So these are things that are available in communities. And so I would love for people to check in with themselves and say, what would I love to be doing? What would make me happy? And then you're going to be surprised how easy it is to find groups of people who are also doing that. Some people like building things. Habitats for Humanity is a wonderful volunteer situation where they're helping less fortunate people. And they're fun people because they're all there because they want to be there. And you're doing things with your hands and you're creating something. And it's a wonderful way, in addition to the ones that you mentioned, going to the hospital or, an assisted care living center or things like that.
Yeah. And I know that too, simple things like even pickleball, or tennis, things like that. People will say if they're single, I'm not going to do that because I'm not part of a couple. But we were doing pickleball, my husband and I, last year, up until the end of the year. We had about 3 people in our team who were singles.
Right.
And we rotated them in. We made friends. We still see them offline, off the court. And it's just been wonderful. So you don't need to refrain from joining these things if you're not a couple, because you can always fit in and rotate. So, pickleball or lawn bowling or whatever it might be is another avenue. And then also meetup groups. You can just get on the site of meetup groups. And if there's not a meetup group that interests you, then you can create one. And they have really easy steps to show you how to create your own meetup group.
Absolutely. And they're great. They're book clubs. Not only are there lots of books clubs, but there's specific kinds of book clubs. Self-help book clubs or Shakespearean book clubs or science fantasy book clubs anyway, there's all kinds of meetups. I agree. So then there's another level even of connection besides that level of joining a group and being involved. And that is being able to have deep, serious discussions with people. So out of these groups, you're going to find some people that you connect with, that you have a strong affinity with, maybe even some family members or a spouse. And taking the time where you can talk about serious subjects. So what do you think about the current political situation? Now, you might say, well, these are potentially loaded discussions. But as long as you're open to listening and acknowledging what the other person's saying, then hopefully they're going to listen to you and you're going to be able to state your opinion. And hopefully you're both going to learn something. And so that's the beginning of being able to share deeper, this is what's happening in my life kind of discussions.
We get back to the relationship with yourself. Make yourself a priority. Make your emotional and mental well-being a priority. And also that leads me to make your food choices a priority, your physical well-being, so that you're going to feel well enough to get out there on the court or to go volunteer, to interact with others. Eat so that you are thriving. And there's plenty of cooking classes to go to, and wellness groups. I think it's wonderful to connect, and hiking groups, and then camping, where then you overnight camp and then you cook your food together.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I was just going to say that, I'm at a point right now where I'm actually dating, and I'm actually part of a yoga community that I really enjoy. I'm a certified Kundalini yoga teacher, but we're doing a spring cleanse. And I'm doing the cleanse because I want to lose a few pounds and I want to up my vitality. It's going to help me live longer. And so this was a group activity. We meet online. We all get together. We have cooking. We share our cooking and our recipes together. And I've lost 10 pounds already in the last couple of weeks. So, and I'm eating healthy. I'm eating real organic food, and I'm taking more time to prepare the food. And so this was me making a priority out of taking better care of myself to support what it is I want to be doing in my dating part of my life.
Yes, absolutely. And that's really combating loneliness right there, to engage. And it's very courageous, because dating is not for the faint of heart, as we know, right? As we deal with our clients.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. But I think close to 50% of all marriages these days the initially contact is online. So there's a lot of ways to reach out and to meet people and to break through that it's easy and convenient. And so part of it, again, coming back to that common theme, you have to love yourself enough to make some changes, to take some risk, so that you can bring into your life some of the things that you'd really like to have. And
that's right.
It's so hard. And there is help available. You don't have to do it alone.
You don't have to do it alone. That's so true. And also, there's our area of expertise in terms of people seeking help, our transformative coaching,
right?
People reaching out, and regular talk therapy, whatever it is that will fulfill you and inspire you to be able to really develop a loving and intimate relationship with yourself, so that you can take that relationship with yourself and be able to then integrate to create a romantic, if that's what you're desiring, or at least an intimate platonic relationship with another. Just really, encouraging the listeners out there to take a risk, pick up the phone, call somebody, have coffee with them. If you're feeling lonely, please initiate the very thing you desire.
Sometimes loneliness spirals down to an actually dangerous level. People can get depressed as a result of loneliness, and it can actually cause some suicide. Thoughts of suicide ideation and potential risk of suicide. So again, raising your awareness and being conscious of where you're at, there is a lot of help. There are free phone numbers that you can call to get help at any time of the day or night.
Right.
So there's a spectrum in terms of how this loneliness is impacting us. And one of the big things, and I know that you've experienced this with your clients too, Jeanne, that it can be really hard sometimes when people have been hiding their feelings, needs, and desires from themselves for so long. It can be hard to make those initial steps, to make those connections, to know what we're really feeling and what we really need and really desire. And so that's part of making that effort to connect with yourself so that you can love yourself. Once you start to connect with and know your feelings, needs, and desires, then you can start to honor them and you can share them with others. And then others can help you meet them and take care of them.
You know, as we say in our work, the past doesn't get the final say in your future. You do. So whatever has happened up to this point in your life, it doesn't mean that that has to continue. There is a transformation of your own life that can occur so that you can align with the future that you desire. And the way I love to talk about it is, you know, those whispers of your heart, or maybe even much louder, a deeper yearning that is calling to you, to not sweep that under the carpet with your mind, but to lean in with an open heart and get curious about what is this desire inside of me. And then even if you don't know the when, the where, the how, the why, just lean in and begin to make choices and take actions that are in alignment with that desire. And that for sure will combat the loneliness, because now you're starting to trust your intuitive knowing that this is the direction to take. Again, even if you don't know what it's going to look like, feel like, you know, but just leaning in and making choices from that place.
And it's not always as easy as it sounds, because you have to break years and years of habit. You've created these habits typically when you were young, between the ages of 0 and 7 and 8. And so they've been with you for a long time, typically. And so exactly what Jeanne said is the perfect way to start. And if you need help, get some help to really be able to connect with those and give yourself permission to start loving yourself by connecting and knowing who you are and what your feelings, needs, and desires are. Really powerful, life-changing, transformative work.
Yeah, because, you know, I've discovered, I know you've discovered with our clients and just, you know, interacting with friends and relatives that, you know, this loneliness is a very large example of self-abandonment.
Yes.
There's a way that you are literally leaving yourself alone if you are experiencing loneliness. And so you need, with the help of folks like ourselves, somebody who can really see you and can really feel from you who you really are, and bring that into your conscious awareness so that you can lead with that as your truth.
Yeah. So I had a client one time, and this was kind of an extreme case because he had a very difficult childhood. And we were going through the program, and he got to a point where I asked him, can you tell yourself that you love yourself? And his throat shut down. He was so challenged, and he had so much trauma around hiding his feelings and his needs and his desires for himself that he couldn't even tell himself that I love myself. And he had no control over it. It was just a psychosomatic response.
Yeah.
And it took a total of 3 sessions. But I had tears in my eyes when he could finally tell himself that he loved himself. And that was the beginning of a radical transformation in his life and his relationship with his significant other. And he's now created, believe it or not, he's created a school with special teaching for children who have certain traumas that make it difficult for them to participate in group activities. So really cool.
Oh, wow. That's a beautiful, beautiful story. I love that.
Yeah. That's why you and I do what we do, right?
That's right. That's what we love, right? There's no greater gift than to witness and be a part of your client's transformation in real time.
Yeah.
It's such an honor.
So the other thing about loneliness is, this is going to sound a little weird for some people, but there are fears that we're harboring. There are things that are holding us back. And if we can't name them and work through them to get to the other side, to enable ourselves to partake in things like, he had a fear that he wasn't allowed to say, I love myself. But by getting to the other side of it, then so many other things opened up. And that's an important part of breaking through and breaking out of your old habits. And Jeanne talked about this idea of, the past doesn't define our futures. But if we don't make any changes, we're going to push the past into our future. And it's going to repeat itself, and it's going to be the same. So hopefully you're getting the message through listening to this, that you get motivated to make some changes. And so when you make some changes, then you're going to open up new possible futures and new possibilities that you're going to be excited about. And hopefully that's going to be a positive reinforcing cycle that's going to cause you to make more and more connections and to have more and more happiness and love in your life.
So I think we are approaching the end of our time today. And thank you, Greg. This has been such an insightful conversation and very deep. And for those listening, if you take away one thing from this episode, I think Greg has given us several as well, but let it be that your commitment to create friendships or to call in your beloved, to create connection with others, be the most important thing and generative act that you do in your life. And to be healthy and vital in doing it at the same time. And when you're well into your golden years, it will become clear that relationships were the most important part of your time here on the planet. So please honor this time. It is precious. So one small challenge for this week, and I think Greg touched on it, but reach out. Reach out to somebody in real time, not just sending a text. Pick up the phone and connect with someone. Let them know you care. Or maybe send them a note in the mail. Can you imagine? Snail mail. I've been thinking about you. But to reach out to that degree, or like Greg was talking about earlier, striking up conversations in the checkout line of the grocery store. Just striking up conversations with strangers, commenting on something that they're wearing or the color that they're wearing. People just love to be complimented.
Right.
So just be the one to get the ball rolling, be the initiator, and it will come back to you in spades.
So one of the ways that you're going to be able to do what you just described is to make yourself important. Put yourself near the top of that list, because those really important things always get done, and you just haven't made yourself important enough until now.
Beautiful, beautiful. And on that note, Greg, would you please share with our listeners how they might reach you?
Oh, I would love to hear from them. And you can check me out and find out how to contact me at my website, which is www.gregwheelercoaching.com. One word, it's GREGWHEELER coaching.com. I would love to hear from you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. And just one last parting quote from, again, our Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. He said, "Human connection grounded in love always heals." Thank you for listening, and always remember to take care of yourself first. Thank you for listening and for watching if you're joining us on YouTube. If you got value out of this conversation, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when the next episode of the Love Sugar podcast drops. Until next time, always take care of yourself first.